Welcome back. Now, in November last year, a Nigerian Senator Dino Melaye raised an alarm in the Senate over an alleged daily payment of 25 billion naira to one e-collection firm he called Remita as 1% of monies transferred to the government's single treasury account. Melaye has said that the federal government on September 15, 2015 mopped up the sum of 2.5 trillion naira through Remita, adding that the company charged 1% of any amount it remitted to the TSA, and that by September 15, the company had collected 25 billion naira. The Senate subsequently urged the Central Bank of Nigeria and the Ministry of Finance to suspend lodgements into the Treasury single account to allow for investigation of the alleged fraud. The Senate thereafter set up an ad hoc committee to investigate the issue. The Senate also ordered that all the monies collected so far by the company be returned. Of course, the company complied. Now, it later emerged that Senator Melaye was actually not correct in his allegations. For instance, it was later discovered that what the senator called Remita is actually the software deployed for the collection of funds into the TSA and not the firm itself. The firm is actually known as System Specs. It has also emerged that the monies collected was not up to 25 billion naira, and in fact, the 1% fee did not go to System Specs alone. The Senate committee has now turned in its report recommending, among others, that the termination now of the contract between the CBN and System Specs, and of course, as well as the 1% TSA fees. It also recommended the CBN and deposit money banks refund their own share of the fee collected, and that System Specs should just be settled once and for all for providing the software. It says the company must not be paid beyond 700 naira per transaction for the collections made so far. Joining me on the program right now is Remita, who is the Executive Director of System Specs, and that's actually the company that got the contract. The contract for, well, you want to call it Remita. Now, thank you very much for joining us on the program. First, let me just start by asking you, what exactly is the difference between Remita and System Specs? Because when this issue came up, the general impression was that, look, Remita was awarded a contract and Remita was making billions of naira on a daily basis from Nigerians.
Thank you, DEJI. Remita is actually a product. The company is called System Specs. We've been around 24 years. Many people don't even know that. And Remita has been around for about 12 years. So Remita predates TSA, as it were. And so Remita is derived from the word remittance. Just like the other products we do, we've got Human Manager, which is an HR and payroll solution, so we call it Human Manager. And when we go into the payment space, remittances, whether it's inbound or outbound, so that's where the product name is derived from. So Remita is a product, is an IP, intellectual property of System Specs, a company that's been around for 24 years.
Now tell us exactly how it works, because, you know, a lot of Nigerians still do not have an idea of how this works. Yes, we've been told that, you know, as a result of Remita, the government has been able to save quite a lot. We've been able to plug leakages, and that we have billions of naira now sitting down in government account, and that the government is able to just take a bird's eye view of its account and know how much it has in its account.
Well, if I must say, Remita is a phenomenon to the extent that technology allows you to do different things. Remita is a platform for making payments and receiving payments. So it's technology that's 100% indigenous, that started with us, like I said, about 12 years ago. And it helps anyone, organizations, governments, local or international, to make payments from any bank account to any other bank account of a commercial bank or a microfinance bank, or into mobile wallet schemes, or through direct debit mandates, or internet banking. I mean, so it's a one-stop electronic payments and collections platform that has been conceptualized and designed and developed in Nigeria that can be used by organizations and individuals. So that's in a nutshell, that's what Remita is.
Okay, now let's talk about your contract with the Central Bank of Nigeria, which is currently generating so much controversy in the country. Tell us about it. At what point did you go into this contract with the Central Bank? And tell us when it actually started.
Thank you for that. So where do we start? The TSA, if we understand the TSA concept,
Of course.
yeah, I mean, that's a treasury single account. And like every financial transaction management that involves the movement of funds, you need technology behind it. And about 2011, the CBN was looking to meet that need and was evaluating different options available. And so Remita was evaluated alongside other options. At the end of the day, Remita was selected.
Other options.
Oh,
It's
sure.
not as if, yeah.
Other options. It wasn't a freebie. I mean, this is technology. You want to be sure it works. And the TSA
So
itself.
it's not as if there was no competition at all.
Mine, there was local and foreign. I mean, there was
Because we're still
local
going
and
to
foreign.
talk about that when we're going to talk about the Senate report.
We didn't design Remita for TSA. Remita is just an innovative, forward-looking platform that continues to evolve by the day. And at that point, it represented the best option. And with every sense of modesty, we were fortunate to be selected above other options. And the contract ended up being signed after that selection process in December 2011. So that was when the contract was signed. And at that point, it was about the outbound payments. There wasn't even enough or sufficient data to determine the entire scope of the nature of transactions because this was absolutely fragmented. Nobody could put a finger on the table to say.
So basically, at the initial stage, it was really about the outbound payment,
Yeah.
not what was coming in.
It was about the inbound and outbound, but the specifics you could speak to then was about the outbound in terms of the terms. And the contract clearly stated that at some point down the line, you were going to speak to the inbound when you had sufficient data or something to guide how you were going to arrive at charges. And that took a while to arrive at. And in 2013, that was eventually done after a series of multi-level engagement with different stakeholders. And in 2013, the contract was updated to reflect not just the inbound, but the terms that guided the inbound, that guided the inbound component of TSA. So we've got a contract that spells out the terms of this.
Now, still talking about that contract, we have the Senate report here. That the Senate, of course, set up a committee after one of the senators actually raised the alarm on the floor of the Senate that Remita was making, system specs, I should say, was making so much money through Remita, and that you were making billions of naira in a day, and that between when you started the implementation of when they actually started the implementation, especially on the inbound now of TSA, that you had made about 25 billion or so. And, you had an agreement with the CBN that, for every amount paid in, that you were going to get 1% of that. Can you explain to us, was 1% actually coming to you? You were making 1% of every amount of money that came into the government as a way of payment now into the banks?
Thank you for that. This is probably going to afford an opportunity to clarify that. For collection schemes, generally, the rates and fees are agreed on based on the nature of such schemes, the complexity, the nature of infrastructure to be deployed, who the other members of the ecosystems will be to make it happen. And the multi-stakeholder engagement I mentioned earlier factored all of these things in before 1% was eventually agreed and signed off in a contract. The 1% really will never come to system specs. It is shared between us, all the banks, all the commercial banks, and the central bank. So those are the parties to the 1%. And it was as alarming, and still is very alarming, that it could have been conjectured that 25 billion was being made by Remita, albeit system specs, in a day. That would probably have suggested that in this economy, maybe about 25 trillion was passing through the throughput in the economy.
Yeah.
And of course,
on a daily basis.
And so that's in itself caught us off guard, that where could this have been coming from? So without dwelling on that, 1% doesn't come to system specs. 1% represents the collection fee that is shared by all the parties in the ecosystem that makes the FG and TSA.
That's yourself, the
all
deposit
the commercial
money
banks and the central bank. Those are the parties to the 1% charge. And nothing, and this is a subject of public information, by the way, as at when this was raised, it became clear there was nothing like 25 billion coming to system specs or Remita at any point in time. Not at all.
Well, let's talk about this report by the Senate Joint Committee on Finance, Banking, Insurance, and other financial institutions and public accounts. I mean, you take a look at some of the recommendations. For instance, one of its key recommendations, and that's the first, it's recommended that the contract be terminated.
Well, I'm not sure I'm competent enough to speak on the report of the Senate. I've seen it, not as if I've done extensive research, but that was on the news that, and I think it was also not correctly reported by the media. And so that's the Senate are terminated. It was a recommendation.
Recommendation, of course.
So to put that in context, and that recommendation, to my mind, by everything one has seen, might probably not be reflective of the circumstances of putting TSA in place in the first instance. And if at best this represents a commercial dispute, you probably will have been expecting something like go review, which with due respect to the Senate, were things that were already in place before this was even ever raised on the floor of the Senate. And the background to it was the collection component, which we call the inbound, had been mandated since 2013, but nothing had happened until 2015. I mean, we've done all of the work, the infrastructure.
Oh, you mean between 2013 and 2015?
Nothing happened. This was supposed to have happened. I mean, all the MDAs.
You were not collecting any, you were not making any money.
No, I mean, the work had been done, like I said, and so we started counting our losses. Not until the new regime came in, and apparently the new regime had seen that TSA represented something significant, especially at a time like this when revenues on the national level had started to dwindle. And it was clear that this was a way to go. And I think it was a no-brainer to say what's been on ground, we necessarily might be the ones to start it, but this looks like something we should swim with. And so there was that circular that says all MDAs were to comply by September 15.
Exactly.
And immediately, huge funds nobody expected started rolling in.
Rolling in.
And the contract ab initio that we have says these fees can be reviewed in the face of emerging realities. So discussions had actually started on that. Because,
to actually review.
Oh, sure, because like I said, at the initial time, there wasn't even any, so it was like a blind plunge. You had technology, you knew it could work, you knew it could help the country. You didn't know where exactly to place your bet. 1% was announced. That wasn't actually what we negotiated,
and
by the way.
At that time, it was difficult to actually guess how much was going to be coming in. I mean, the volume of the transaction, so to speak. It
couldn't have been anywhere near imaginable. And when you say this, many times people wonder. One of the things we stumbled on, by the way, at one of the sensitization workshops, was as of December last year, about 17,000 bank accounts had been closed. Before this, nobody had an idea, at least I didn't have a clue, that we could be operating as much as, or as many as 17,000 different bank accounts by different MDAs. And all of a sudden, monies that were in these accounts and other transactions, for the first time in this country, there was visibility in terms of cash assets of government that government could sit on to better manage for the common good. And so at that time, it was clear that you needed a starting position, and that was 1%. And by September 14, by the way, the deadline was going to be 15th. At one of the project review meetings, funds are suddenly coming in. Nobody had an idea this way. I mean, these funds were there. I mean, so this is going to impact on fees. And so that mechanism had started. Meetings were in progress. In fact, positions were being taken until there was this announcement that a company called Remita was making 25 billion a day. And to be honest, that threw us off balance. And attempts to try to even explain, I mean, you wish you...
It's quite surprising that at that time, nobody talked about the CBN making money or the commercial banks making money from this as well. I mean, the fees, yeah.
Well, we were in the eye of the storm, and we would rather derive principles from this. Even for us, some great learnings in terms of advocacy, in terms of visibility, whether you're on the side of government or not, that there is an essential duty to get people informed, especially of significant initiatives. It took many people aback as well to realize that of an indigenous company was behind the technology that was doing this for the country. People didn't believe it at first, if not those who had known us and had known the brand name Remita before now. And one also felt that should have played out somewhere. But never mind, that didn't come up. It probably is just coming up now that we have what it takes to solve our own problems, that we can actually benefit from the knowledge economy as a nation, that would really don't need to be looking for prebends and depend on foreign countries for technology to move us forward.
Let me just take you back to
Okay.
this report by the Senate committee, by the way. You know, one of the recommendations, of course, is that what you should be paid in actual fact should be somewhere around 656 million naira, and that you know, the Senate basically made its calculation based on what it said 500 and 700 naira per transaction for electronic transfer and payments as specified in the CBN revised guidelines. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, like I said earlier, I'm not really sure I'm competent to be debating the report, but since it's a point of information, that isn't even supposed to be the money going to system specs. It's supposed to be the money being shared by all the three parties I mentioned earlier.
Okay, yeah. Okay,
Meaning
yeah.
all
Okay.
18 commercial
all 18
banks,
commercial
system
banks.
specs, for all the work that's been done to bring in trillions into government coffers. You guys go figure out
How?
what this, and this is retroactive. It's mind bleeding to say rules can suddenly be changed in the middle of the game. This is for consumed services. It's mind-boggling. It makes you want to lose faith in the institutions that are supposed to be regulating things or advocating for the sustenance of entrepreneurship and knowledge capital. But be that as it may, one may also want to say that that basis may well reside in the wisdom of the committee that has looked into this. But I would, with every sense of reasonableness, want to say that doesn't come near anything, near the value that's been consumed in terms of making things work, in terms of work of 4 or 5 years down the line, in terms of the quality of things that have been done, more so in terms of being made helpless. Because not only were we made to refund the fees that were earned as part of the contract, it may interest you to know that since October, when we returned the fees we had earned, we had stopped charging. So it means for one whole year.
And your service is still being used.
For one whole year, DJ, it means this indigenous company has worked for this country for nothing. We've got a staff strength about 200 with service technology. There are people out there in the financial ecosystem that are part of this. All the banks are part of this. Everybody is doing everything to make sure the government is not embarrassed, that we can be in charge of our cash assets, and we are the only ones who are left to bear the brunt of it.
Let me get this straight. Is Remita still being used as we speak?
Very much so. Over 900 MDAs are connected to this.
So it's not as if it has been suspended after the Senate decided to investigate this.
This has not been suspended. We continue to support it 24/7. We continue to do everything to make sure, because to us this is about it's some patriotic thing. It may hurt us in the short term, and that's why we don't believe it's just a battle for system specs. In itself, the investigation might have, roughened us up a bit, but we've risen up to that to say it just may well be a good time in the history of our nation that technology is coming up to the forefront to be discussed at a level like this. That can technology represent the future for this country? Can we begin to earn decent money as Nigerians by investing in technology and knowledge capital? Can we really look ourselves in the face and say there's some point at which Nigerians should be empowered? Can we look ourselves in the face and say it's not a crime to earn money without stealing, but based on... You don't want to imagine how much we lose to foreign software every year. You don't want to imagine. This comes in nowhere close to what we're making. And yeah, we may be at the forefront, being the flagship of the Nigerian software industry, but it's something that we think has been imposed on us at this time, and we would be ready to continue to engage, to continue to stand for industry. We've had a fair share of goodwill, by the way, by those who know us, who know what we stand for. And it's amazing. People have been asking us in the first instance, why did you return the money? At that point, it was more of, do you want to take a legal position that can jeopardize national interest? It's a difficult sell because it's not an everyday thing. You want to insist on your rights, and you're going to ask yourself, so what will have come out of it? You would probably have won an academic battle, but Nigeria might have lost something. And so we've stuck with it, and to say, in as much as it depends on us, TSA will not be subverted on account of what we have control over. So it may be tough, but we're very much committed to it. We're working with different stakeholders to be sure that this can be brought to some firm closure. And we're quite honestly hopeful that this will happen.
Well, let's just hope this is resolved and resolved very quickly. But quite surprising that you continue to render this service. Well, I don't know whether to use the words now for free, but we just wait and see how it all unfolds.
We hope it won't be a long wait. I mean, it's beginning to tell, like I said, it's been a whole year. It's been a whole year, and there have been different options, different suggestions. People have suggested different things, but we just remain focused to say the potentials herein for our country are quite enormous. Quite enormous. It will amaze you to know how easily people can now pay government, how easily MDs can now track payments, how easily on a single dashboard the treasurer of the Federation, the accountant general, and the custodians of the funds at the CBN can know the net cash value of this country at any point in time, 24/7. How funds go in, how funds go out, where it's going, for what purpose, on a single platform. And how people can make payments at any bank branch, how they don't need to be stranded over the weekend. They can pay with their cards, they can pay via website of different MDAs, even university students. And it's just so amazing. The ecosystem that's built around this, the potentials for financial inclusion. I mean, how I wish that the impact of TSA on this economy can be investigated from another perspective, rather than just this mono perspective that's been somewhat alarmist, in itself been distracting, because we now need to begin to appear at fora like this. We've always been ultra conservative. I mean, 24 years down the line, we don't even have a signboard, and yet we're Nigeria's largest software firm. Many people don't know that the first ever World Bank bid for software in this country was won by an indigenous company, this same System Specs. I mean, these are not things you will hear out there. So it's painful on one hand that this is how you've been introduced to the public. And so we're taking upon ourselves to say there are many more things to say about this company, about indigenous software companies. There are many companies in Nigeria making fantastic software that can go places, that can cause this country to be recognized as one leading, the renaissance in knowledge capital in Africa. We need to begin to see more of that.
Dear Remita, thank you very much for coming on the program, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Well, we'll take a short break, and when we come back, we'll be discussing something else. Every day, every hour, and every minute, news break in Nigeria. Things happen so fast, it's most times difficult to track and comprehend them. But that's what we do right here on DEJI360. 2015, would you want to come back again?
It's like asking Jesus Christ if he knew he was going to die, will you want to come back as the savior of the world again?
We do not just help you track the stories, we break them down, explore all the angles, analyze the issues so that you can fully comprehend the stories and use them to make the right decisions.